Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Real Birding Podcast, the show where we crack open the world of birding and talk about our own birding adventures. I'm Will Keller, coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm Caleb Putnam, as always, in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Caleb, how are you, man? Haven't talked to you in a week.
Well, I'm doing great. The cold weather out here, we got a little crisp in the air. Blue jays are moving over the condo here as I'm working today, and definitely energized by the cool weather. It's finally starting to break this Indian summer. How about you?
Yeah, seriously. Well, from the bird perspective, it's a little bit cooler here, so that vibe is in the air. I have noticed that the chimney swifts, they're not gone, but we're not getting those big migrating flocks coming into the chimney next to my apartment here. So it's kind of a sort of solemn goodbye, but they'll be back in the spring, so excited for that as well.
Nice. Yeah, it's always tough. Fall's so great, but it's got that sadness to it that as things start to disappear, you're like, oh no, stay, don't leave. It's always the push and pull.
That's right. Well, dude, I am so excited for this episode today. We have a very fun guest, Daniel Bernard, the man, the myth, the legend, who has undertaken one of the most impressive feats of birding, pure exhaustion of just about anybody I know. He has just completed a big year where he set out to see 100 species of birds in every single lower 48 state. We are going to talk to him after the break and get into it. I can't wait.
Super exciting.
Let's get into it. All right, like I said, Danny Bernard is an adventurer, a birder, and a Michigan native, and here he is. Welcome to the show, Danny.
Hey, Will and Caleb, how's it going?
Going great over here, man. Good to talk to you.
Hey, okay, brother. Good to see you.
Good to see you, especially you, Caleb. I met with Will earlier this year, but I feel like I haven't seen you in over a year.
That seems to be what happens when you take off and go to all the other 49 states for a year, hey?
Right.
Yeah, man. So last I saw you, I think it was like the second to last week in April, and I actually got to help you get to 100 species in North Carolina, which is my current home state. That's pretty exciting. I'm feeling pretty proud of that now that you've actually completed your goal.
Yeah, that was great birding with you there. I have to ask, have you gotten a bobwhite yet?
No, that is I've told that story so many times now. We were out at PD National Wildlife Refuge, and bobwhites are kind of like an irritating thing for me because I got into birding in Michigan too late to ever be able to count one now that they're officially extirpated. Not that I've even come across one. They're still super hard to come across, even though they're mostly escaped domestic birds. Anyways, we're at PD National Wildlife Refuge, and we're looking for Swainson's warblers and Kentucky warblers and all sorts of cool stuff. And I step off the trail to go take a whiz. And about halfway through, Danny shouts from 100 yards down, there's quail. And I'm whipping around. I'm like, crap, I'm busy. I can't actually look. And I ended up missing them, and they were gone.
No, you're serious?
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
He did a bit of bushwhacking too to see if we could find them in the shrubbery, but they were long gone.
Yeah, that's right. I'll get my chance there.
Yeah, such is birding. This we've heard this story many times.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Danny, question for you. Where are you at now, and how much longer do you have to go in your adventure for the year?
I'm currently in the Walmart parking lot in Mount Vernon, Washington, which was my 48th of my 48 states this year that I have visited with the goal of seeing 100 species in each state. I'll be still continuing on this trip for the next couple months, casually working my way down through Washington, back into Oregon, and then towards Half Moon Bay in California, where I'm going to be heading out on a pelagic with Alvaro's Adventures. And then after that, just sort of dilly-dallying my way through California, Nevada, Arizona, and to New Mexico, where I plan to set up shop, living there and possibly getting into guiding there once this year is wrapped up.
Wow. You're permanently moving down there at the end of this, huh?
That is my plan, yeah.
Was that decision reached during the adventure, or did you know ahead of time?
I kind of had the idea before the start of the year, but I kind of also had the approach of, well, I have a whole year to figure it out. I don't need to worry all that much right now. but I don't have a whole year to figure it out anymore. So I think that a decision, I reached that within the past few months, like the concrete decision. That's what I'm planning on doing.
How awesome.
So cool. I want to take just a 10,000 foot view here. And you are one of the most dedicated bird listers that I know. You're the kind of guy that tries to see as many as they can in every county. Hence, I think why this sort of style of big year called to you. But can you speak to what is it about bird listing that gives you the drive to go out and, drive through the night, put 100,000 miles on your car or whatever it is? What is it about bird listing specifically, do you think?
I don't know exactly. Like, I enjoy definitely the nature element of birding and just the birds in general massively, but there is something about the sort of like spreadsheet side of things, the checking all the boxes, whether it's like even when I'm just going somewhere for a morning of birding, I want to have as big of a list as possible on that morning list, and things like that. I don't know exactly what the draw is there, because while I've always been sort of a data person, this level of the listing sort of thing has never really drawn my attention in anything else. So I think it's like the perfect combination of, I like birding and I like the listing, but together I like both of them so much more than I've ever liked anything else.
Yeah, it's really funny. We always talk about how listing or birding and bird listing can really start to sound like stamp collecting to people who don't really know what I'm talking about. But I actually don't know any birders who are also like coin collectors or stamp collectors or something like that. There is something about birding that seems to make people really lock into that specifically.
Right. I'm not sure either, but there is something about it for sure that, like, everyone I know who is a serious lister, that is their thing. Like, there are some people, might have other hobbies or passions or whatever, but for the most part, people who are listers, their number one thing is birding, always.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I've always not even understood this about myself, I have to admit. So it's really entertaining to have this conversation with hardcore birders, because I've been super hardcore about my state list and my county lists. But if you actually ask me why I care, I don't really know, other than it's just really fun to do it. And maybe we have like this Asperger's-y itch to scratch or something along these lines. I don't know. I mean, birding is just such a niche community and an interesting group of people. And I also wondered, do people not stamp collect because they don't have time? Like we spend all the time on birding, so we would do it. We just don't have time.
That might be, yeah, for sure. And I mean, also, I can't think of any other hobbies you could get into that are as data oriented as bird listing specifically, but also as like random or as much of a chance to fail. Like if you're chasing something with stamp collecting or things like that, I can't imagine, I might be totally off base because I'm not too familiar with it, but I can't imagine there's as much of a chance of a dip that just is like the gut wrenching feeling that makes when you get the bird so much better too.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's really funny. I've never thought about it like that, but that's so true. It's even different than like international traveling, where that if you put the time in, there's some target species that if they're really common, you're probably going to get. Like if you're going to the Ecuadorian Andes and you're going to a cock of the rock lek, you're going to see that bird, But with the local listing and the local chasing, if there's a flyby, ash-throated flycatcher at whitefish, or just shows up behind the feeders there, and you drive up overnight to try and see it for your Michigan big year, there is like a more than 50% chance statistically, historically, that you're going to miss that bird.
And even sometimes getting the bird isn't a great feeling depending on the situation. There's one example of this that I've brought up with Caleb before, the Townsend's warbler at Tawas a couple of years ago, that was found in the evening of the first day and seen again very briefly the second day by 2 or 3 people, one of whom was Caleb. And I still think he had a terrible day.
That's a very good point. That was one of the least satisfying mega birds that I've gotten of my life. And the thing, we had like a 5-second look distant, and I walked up on it, and I'm with my camera going like, oh, I'm totally going to get frame fillers. The lighting was perfect. And I walk up to it and we can't refind it. It was never seen again. Like I literally was the last person to see it. And I'm totally with you. Birding I would say it has a lot more highs than lows. Tell me if you agree. But when you have these lows, like if I would have missed Townsend's Warbler completely, especially by like 10 seconds or 10 minutes, it just ruins your week sometimes, right?
That for sure. That happened to me with the pink-footed goose that we had a couple years ago. I got out of work, drove up there. It was a good 3.5-hour drive. As I'm walking out to the spot, people are like, yeah, it's right there. And I walked out right to everyone was looking at it. And they said, oh, it just swam behind that patch of cattails about 5 seconds ago. It's been doing that on and off. It'll come out at any moment, I'm sure. Bird was never seen again.
Yeah.
And
oh my gosh.
And that one, I'm sure that entire time during your drive up, you were also nervous because I had actually gotten there almost the exact same story. I had pulled up to the field that it was in with Canada geese. And literally, as Talus and I were pulling up a half mile away, we see thousands of geese get up and fly basically to the horizon. And we're like,
oh no.
And we look out in the field, and there's a guy with a giant camera walking out there, and he's walking back to his car. And we're like, he didn't, did he? Did he really just do that? So we ended up looking around the area for 4 or 5 hours, and finally someone that was also birding in the area refound it on the same lake that Danny then proceeded to dip on it. So that almost happened to me, but we did get to see it probably an hour before you got there.
Yeah, that was brutal.
So Danny, I'm curious how you came up with the concept for this, because I have to concede I haven't heard of somebody doing this exact contest, or I don't know if you look at it as a contest or you're trying to beat others. But can you tell us how you came about with the concept for this?
Yeah, absolutely. There's kind of like a 3-part sort of origin to it. The first being, ever since I started getting serious into birding, which it was around in 2021 when I became more hardcore about it, I've done some sort of big year-esque thing every year. In 2021, I did what I refer to as my Lapeer County accidental big year, where I just was getting serious into birding and started going after every bird in Lapeer County. 2022, I ended up doing my full-on crazy Michigan big year, where I had the 337 species, breaking the previous record at the time, although it's a record I think might go down this year. David Pavlik's having a really good year. And then in 2023, I did a full-on dedicated Lapeer County big year. And then in 2024, I had already had the idea for this year and was saving up my money, but I still did with my buddy Isaac Polanski a big June and had, I think it was 226 species in June, which was a really good month for the worst month of the year. But after 2022 in particular, I kind of had, like, when the year was over, I suddenly had this, I guess I would call it almost like a void of like what comes next. And the draw of just doing another Michigan big year didn't have any appeal to me because, like, not only been there, done that, but I also broke the record. And what am I going to do now? Just every year try to go out and break my own record? That didn't feel of any interest to me at all. And also throughout that year, I had gotten to know so many awesome people, both of yourselves included. And like people like Isaac Polanski, who I mentioned, one of my best friends to this day, tons of other really cool people throughout the Michigan birding community. And I had the idea of, like, there has to be some element of this everywhere throughout America, this sort of awesome birders and birding community all over the place. And wouldn't it be kind of cool to get to know some of those people? That, wrapping back to my sort of big year itch, the idea of just doing an ABA big year, though, also wasn't appealing to me at all, because you're just, oh, go to California, go to Texas, go to California, go to Florida, back to Texas. Oh, a rare bird showed up in New York. Okay, back to Texas, back to Florida. Yep. And that wasn't appealing in any way. But I have always been into listing. You mentioned trying to see birds in every county. I never completed the goal of 100 species in every county in Michigan, but that was a goal that my dad has completed. I think he was only the 6th or so person to do that. And I definitely share a lot of the same elements of my birding passion with him. That sort of rubbed off on me. And so that sort of getting to know people across the country, wanting to do something else big year-y, came together for what if I traveled the country looking at birds. And at the same time, I was working full-time as an assistant store manager at Aldi in first Lake Orion, Michigan, and then Waterford. And it was a job. I didn't dislike it, but I wasn't at all passionate or enthused by it. And I definitely wanted to do something else with my life. And the idea of getting into guiding came about around the same time. But there's not really that much of a market for guiding in Michigan. We have Kirtland's Warblers, which are fantastic, but there's already several groups and other private guides who lead tours for those. And really, you don't need a guide to find them. They're pretty easy to find in the right part of the state. And I wasn't really familiar with the birds anywhere else where there is a market to get into guiding. And so sort of traveling the country and getting more experience in the field with all of these different birds, and at the same time meeting people all across the country and sort of building a name for myself that could then be converted into a guiding client base. Those three things became the basis of this idea that I had, which then took on a life of its own and became way more about the journey itself than those sort of ideas to start with. But that's sort of where the idea came from, was those three things: the what comes next, people are awesome, and I want to do something else with my life.
That's awesome, man. And you really touched on this in your explanation there, but I love the sort of title for your quest this year: People, Places, and Birds. That's the name of your Patreon and your blog. And by the way, if you guys want to support Danny throughout the rest of this year, and I'm sure we'll get into stories about helping him replace his car, which I think might be coming, you can check out that Patreon. But yeah, man, there's the birding community is so fascinating. It's at times such a warm, supportive, fun, interesting group of people. And I'm really curious. I experienced that a lot in Michigan, and I think to an extent it exists throughout the country, but I do think that Michigan birding community is really special. There's a lot of really hardcore, talented, really good, really generous birders, Caleb Putnam being one of them, that really helped me get onto the scene in like 2020 and 2021 as well. So yeah, man, what a cool message.
It's been awesome. I do agree with you. Michigan, I wouldn't necessarily say Michigan has the best birding community, but I think the way, especially around the time I got more serious into birding, was right when our Discord became a thing. And I think the Discord sort of unified what were previously many small groups of birders into one full-on solid community of birders that, you still mostly interact and hang out with your birders in your local group. But if I want to go birding in Ingham County or, Washtenaw County, I can just hop on Discord, ask for suggestions on places to go, and within a few minutes, birders are there. If I want to meet someone there, it'd be really easy to find someone to go birding with there. And without Discord, I really, this year has taught me too how challenging it is to sort of make those connections with random people when you don't have something like Discord that makes it so simple and easy.
Yeah. What do the other states use by and large? Have you found a mixture of all the old listservs and just WhatsApp groups, stuff like that?
Yes, my main way of meeting people has definitely been through Facebook, be it like your state's birding page, or people finding out about my journey through someone sharing something on Facebook on one of those pages and then reaching out to me via email. But state by state, there are some states that have a Discord, but the problem I've seen that, the way our Discord came about, if you recall, was Andrew. I think it was primarily Andrew Simon leading the charge, but getting all of the local WhatsApp groups and all the local chapters to all come together at one time and just sort of go, hey, we're going to abandon our old platforms and move all at once onto Discord. And because of that, it had the sort of critical mass to take off. And I see a lot of people look at Discord in Michigan or other states and see, wow, that looks awesome. I'm going to create one. And then they tell their friends about it and they have 15 people on it.
Right.
And it never takes off. Whereas Michigan, it was right away, we had 500, 600, however many it was, day one. So I think a lot of things have struggled to sort of do what Michigan did because they haven't approached it in the same organized, all at once way that we went about it in Michigan.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So we got to touch on some stories from your big year here.
Yeah.
What state did you start in? And what are some like initial highlights right out of the gate? I mean, imagine every day you probably had something to write home about. Maybe not quite every day, but
Yeah, so I started in Arizona, in southeast Arizona, doing a big day with local Pima County birder Timothy Burkhart. And that was a great way to kick off the year. I don't remember the exact number, but it was like 27 or 28 lifers just on January 1st, which was one of, but still not my biggest day of the year when it came to lifers. From Arizona, I sort of worked my way across the country through Texas to Florida, then back all the way across the country, still through mostly the southern parts to California, and then back to the East Coast where I met up with Will before heading up into New England, then back through the Great Lakes into the Great Plains, and then finally ending in the Pacific Northwest. It's been a heck of a journey. I have exactly, at this point, I believe, 189 lifers so far this year. Between the pelagic and a few other birds here or there, probably will close in on 200 lifers in the year, which is mind-blowing to me.
yeah. I remember looking at some of your owl totals from your time in January in Arizona, and I'm very jealous. You got some birds on me there. It's going to take me a while to get them back because those are some hard birds to get.
That was my best night of owling I've ever had, bar none. I got some suggestions by Ken Blankenship, a guide down there in southeast Arizona, on where to go owling and what time to start, what elevation to start. And right off the bat, I had 2 western screech owls, followed up by, I believe it was a 3rd western screech owl, a short ways up the road. Then I started working my way up into the mountains there in Pinery Canyon, and pretty quickly got 2 whiskered screech owls. Then got up to the Pinery Canyon campground area where I was planning on trying for spotted owl. But before I could even try for spotted owl, I heard the call of a northern saw-whet owl. And I was not too familiar with their call. I'm more familiar with their song. So I got a recording of that and drove back up the mountain, sent it to a few people, posted it in the Michigan Discord ID channel, got confirmation that it was a saw-whet owl. And I was like, awesome. And I drove back to the campsite, and the spotted owls were on either side of the campsite calling back and forth to each other.
Oh,
and
nice.
That was an unbelievable, that was the night of January 2nd. And that was just like, what a day, what a night.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's my arch nemesis in the ABA area, Danny. I have tried and missed them like 8 times now, and I don't have it.
That's one of my dad's nemesis as well. There's a few birds I've gotten this year that he's particularly jealous of, and that's certainly one of them.
That's a good one. Okay, so just to clarify that I don't think we've nailed this down. Have you completed the result successfully? You have, right?
Yes. On Tuesday, the 23rd of September at 3:37 p.m., I spotted my lifer rhinoceros auklet, which was also bird number 100 for Washington, which was my 48th of the lower 48 states. If money wasn't a factor, I probably would have included Alaska and Hawaii, but just the financial logistics of trying to add those on to the lower 48 was not feasible unless suddenly a millionaire wanted to come along.
All you listeners out there, anybody wants to finish this, what do we have? Almost just a little bit under 2 months left, right?
Yeah,
no,
right.
3 months.
It's getting
October,
late.
November, December.
It's getting late for 100 birds in Alaska, though.
It is.
There might not be 100 species in Alaska right now.
And Hawaii is tough always. So, I think about 85 in Hawaii is pretty easy, but pushing from that 85 to 100 is a real challenge.
Funny. That's a really good point. No, you should be proud of what you did, man. That is, I just can't imagine the sheer force of will it would take to keep going. Did you have any lows? And when you did have those lows, how did you push through? I've certainly had times where I'm birding where I'm just like, I'm going home, man.
Yeah, back in June, right around the time I was actually just wrapping up one of my highs of the year, which was the Adirondacks in the North Country in upstate New York. As I was heading from New York to Pennsylvania, I both had the worst seasonal allergies I've ever had by far that left me with about a half a working eye because my left eye was just glued shut. And at the same time, we got hit with that heat wave where it was every day a high in the low hundreds and then at night a low in the high 80s, low 90s, which the combination of not really being able to bird because I couldn't see and not being able to sleep because I'm sleeping in the back of my car when it's 90 degrees out was a good 10-day or so stretch of probably like the most miserable I've ever been in my life. And that was certainly tough to push through. Fortunately, shortly after that stretch was when I headed home to Michigan, and I pretty much just took like a full 10 days off from this quest. I did, some birding a little bit in like Monroe County and a little bit with my dad here or there, but I mostly just sort of laid around the house and played video games, which is not at all what I've done the rest of this year. And it was kind of a needed break from especially the exhaustion of the past few weeks with that allergies and that heat wave.
It definitely hit me. That was one of the first things I thought about here because first of all, I just envy the adventure element and just the like you're heading out on the road with a lot of freedom and a really cool thing. But I just pictured like at some point you're going to hit exhaustion even though you're doing something that's pure fun. And so I think being young has got to help. I mean, I'm in my upper 40s and I think my endurance for this now would definitely be lower than it used to be. So I think you're doing this at the right age. But yeah, I mean, kudos to you for being able to stick it out that long. And I mean, to me, a 10-day break in the middle of it is, I think any human being would need that. There might only be 2 people on the planet who could keep going without any kind of a break. You know what I mean?
For sure. This year has really made me think of Noah Stricker. Then he did his World Big Year. And I do a blog post theoretically every week on Wednesday. I'm really far behind right now, but I've been generally behind for most of the last couple of months, like by at least a few days in every post. But Noah did a daily blog post on top of regularly getting up before dawn to go birding and then staying out after dark to go owling and then doing the post afterwards and organizing travel across the country in places where he doesn't speak the language. And I cannot I think there's very few people in the birding world that could probably relate to his quest as much as I can after this year. There certainly are, probably people who can relate to it more than me, but I don't think there's that many people. And I cannot even imagine doing what he did. That to me probably seems as crazy as what most people would look at my year and go, wow, that's insane. I think it's that at least that equal of an order of magnitude more crazy than my year.
Yeah. It's a miracle that guy even survived. Yeah. I read that book and over the last winter and I was like, geez Louise, that's a different level.
And Roth Gallardi is another one in Pennsylvania. I got to know him a little bit a few years ago, and I have a feeling he could do this as well. He goes to countries where he doesn't speak the language, doesn't know how to rent a car, how to do anything, and then discovers new bird species while doing that. That literally happened to him. So yeah. Anyway, just kudos, for your stamina and for really sticking to it. And I don't know if you guys notice in the new Extreme Birding documentary, which was awesome, by the way, this was one of the core concepts, and they're outsiders, but they were really gung ho. But you guys remember how they had reached a certain point and they're just like, I don't think we can keep going anymore. It really resonated.
I definitely enjoyed and related a lot to listeners. That was especially like the sort of car camping van life sort of elements of it. Also, they had a broken CV joint, which I just recently had to replace my CV joint. I think he fixed it himself though, but I'm not quite as handy of a mechanic as the Riesling brothers. So
yeah.
And that's an important one because that'll kill your car if you don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You also suffered a car accident, in March or early April? Is that right?
Yes, that was in March in Utah, in Salt Lake City. I was on my way to see a bird I not only didn't end up seeing, but realistically wouldn't have counted if I had seen it. Because in Salt Lake City, they have a small population of mandarin duck that are breeding there, but probably won't ever be considered naturalized. But they're a provisional bird, and I figured, oh, I'll go see the mandarin duck. And I missed my turn several times. And then finally, when I corrected myself, uh, a vehicle 2 cars in front of me went to suddenly turn right, resulting in the car immediately in front of me slamming on his brakes. So I slammed on my brakes, and the guy behind me wasn't paying attention and slammed into me, which was a fun one.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that it happens, and you're probably just filled with levels of dread. One, because it's your car. Two, because it's a car crash. That's not safe. And three, because you probably felt like your entire year was in jeopardy, depending on how bad that was, right?
For sure. I mean, immediately when it happened, my first thought was, well, I had a nice 2.5 months. It's over though. And fortunately, the damage is hideous looking. I still have yet to get it fixed. But it's entirely superficial. It's just the rear quarter panel of my driver's side. The paneling is missing. But all of the lights and everything work totally fine. The bumper's fully intact, no damage to the frame at all. And the other driver's insurance company already admitted that their driver was at fault and is going to pay for everything once I get around to dropping my car off for what'll probably be 3 to 6 weeks of not having a vehicle. Which just hasn't been that convenient for me as I've been on this trip. But every penny will be paid for as long as I get it taken care of within 365 days of the accident. So I have until early to mid-March of next year to finally get it fixed.
So Danny, how many miles have you put on this car so far, and how much has the gas bill and maintenance bills cost you? And are you like near capacity in like running out of money basically?
Yeah, I'm coming up on around 46,000 miles right now, just in this year, which is about what I expected, but I think is actually less than what a lot of people thought it would be. But I estimated between 50 and 60,000 miles on the year, given that it's October and I'm at about 46 or so. I'm, closing in on that range. But what I am also closing in on is $0 left in my bank account. So the definitely the maintenance and the gas has been my 3 real only expenses this year have been food, gas, and car maintenance. And the food, you can live pretty cheap on food if you really push yourself to, which I've kind of enjoyed doing this year. As another sort of element of this year that I've really enjoyed is giving up on like the creature comforts of life and just sort of living as bare bones as possible, which is something I have never done before this year in my life. But you can't really get away with living on the cheap with gas and car maintenance when you're traveling across the country. And just recently, I had to pay around $5,500 in assorted maintenance on my car. The CV axle was included in that, as well as my rear wheel bearings were like totally seized up to the point where when the mechanic was changing them, he said they couldn't get them off without hammering them off, and they literally exploded as they were doing that. Which doesn't sound good. I'm not really a car person, but that sounds bad to me. And also I had a control arm bushing that was totally shredded, fractured, and so I need to get that replaced. Plus, the more standard stuff like my brakes were due for a touch up. I needed an oil change, all that sort of stuff, and it's horrifying how fast it adds up.
Yep, that is tough. That is tough. Hence the Patreon. Go support him, everybody. Seriously.
Or I also have a GoFundMe linked there as well if you don't want to subscribe to a monthly thing on Patreon.
There you go. There you go. I gotta ask. So obviously your year is yet to be totally completed. You were gonna bird through the end of the year, as I understand it. But do you have one bird or one sighting or one day or one slew of sightings that really stand out as like a WTF, how did this happen moment? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there were definitely a couple of those days early in the year. Those owls in Southeast Arizona, for example, when I was in Southwest Louisiana and tagged along on a rail banding expedition and got to see 11 different yellow rails and hold 2 of them in my hand. That was pretty cool. When I was in Connecticut, I got to visit the Yale Peabody Museum, like a private tour, and hold an ivory-billed woodpecker, which
Oh
was
yeah.
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But for more recently, we had one of my highlights actually in Montana, which was in a 24-hour window. I tried for great gray owls in the evening in the Pioneer Mountains and had 5 different great gray owls, which was a lifer for me
Oh,
and had
oh
been one
boy.
of my 3 dream birds. And then heading from the Pioneer Mountains up towards Glacier National Park. That like made that full drive that night. Only slept for about 2 hours. Started the next day with white-tailed ptarmigan at Logan Pass, and then got my lifer Cassin's Vireo, and then my lifer Black Swift, and then ended the day with my lifer Vox's Swift. So 4 lifers that second day, 5 lifers, including Great Gray Owl, in that 24-hour window. At a point in time where I'd already racked up, over 175, 180 lifers at that point, was kind of crazy.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that birding alone? Was that just you that day?
Yeah, I had gotten advice on where to try for all of those birds by Montana birder Joshua Wade Koval. But the day
Yeah,
itself, I was birding solo. But
cool.
he had gave me pretty good information on like go to this spot for this bird, try this area for the swifts and the all that sort of stuff.
This is something that I had an experience last year where I was deployed for a work thing in South Texas, and I was alone for weeks on end, and I was lonely, and it was getting how it is when you're in the car pretty much alone, staying in part living a Spartan lifestyle, and finding just bumping into not only rarities but lifers on your own with a little bit of help from people. There's something that's very gratifying, especially I kind of consider myself a social birder. I really like birding with my friends. It's just what I love. Of course, I go out alone all the time, but there's something really fulfilling about bumping into stuff on your own and putting the work in and having it pay off. And it sounds like that's what that day was for you.
For sure. And there's also something very gratifying about having like the great gray owl, for example. I had been trying for about an hour in that spot and wasn't having any luck. It was like I was just driving sort of a back and forth through these fields up in the mountains. And then I was decided I was going to give it one more pass. And I did a U-turn. And as I was doing that U-turn, saw the first great gray owl. And I don't know how I hadn't seen it before because it was like 15 feet off the road, sitting in a tree. And then it flew from there onto a rock, maybe another 30 or so feet farther away, but still only, maybe 50 feet away from me. And it was just like, holy crap. And I think that the search beforehand not having been successful and then suddenly having this holy crap, what the heck, that's a great gray owl moment was so like exuberating.
Yeah, totally.
It's funny you say that, Danny. The last great gray that I saw we had exactly the experience that you just mentioned, and it was in 2005 up on Nebish Island, and we had a little invasion that year. It's like literally 20 years ago now, and we were looking at the back of the field and just driving the road, but looking way at the back, and we went right past the bird 15 feet from the car on a pole and almost missed it because we were looking through it, and it looked like the end of the pole,
I spent some time on Nevish Island during my Michigan big year looking for great gray owl without success, unfortunately. That was not a good year for them eruption wise in general, but also just, I mean, I can't complain too much. 2022 was a crazy year for Michigan birding in general. So, not getting great gray owl is not something I can really gripe about that much.
Yeah.
And it just became a review bird as it turns out. It's gotten so rare. They're really, really difficult. There's a reason we haven't seen it I haven't seen it in 20 years. And I mean, half of our friends have never seen it in Michigan, and they would go if there was one. So,
I think I just learned the other day that there've been a few of them in the UP in the past like couple of weeks. I think there've been like 2 or 3. I think, but they've all been sort of kept under wraps. Is my understanding.
Interesting. The plot thickens.
Uh-huh.
I'm
So
just
who
hoping
knows?
we'll
Maybe
still
I
get our
don't know
chance.
anything about it.
Yeah, of
You have
course,
to
Caleb.
edit that out.
I remember during my big year when we were at Lighthouse Park on the infamous Jaeger Fest, the second Jaeger Fest, not the crazy one, where we had that long-tailed Jaeger that flew over at the end of the day when you came back to say goodbye to everyone. And but we were sitting there talking, and I mentioned needing Great Gray Owl, and you said something about, oh well, there was that one in at Whitefish Point just the other day, and I was like, what are you talking about? And you were like, oh, that's right, I saw that because I'm a reviewer, and that's not public. Never mind.
Yeah, you're spot on with this. Yes, I had forgotten that we had switched it over to a sensitive species. So yeah, well, that one wasn't chaseable though, right? Because usually the
No,
whitefish
it was
ones
not.
they pop up and they're gone after like a day or whatever. So getting one that's chaseable is the really hard part now.
Yeah, I think that one was just found by Chris in the woods, and then it was a one-day wonder. Like 3 or 4 people saw it, and then it was gone.
Typical.
Well, it looks like we're reaching the end of our time here, Danny. So glad that you came on. I wanted to leave you with this one question, which is, if there's anybody out there who's listening that's thinking about taking on a big year of some sort and really ready to, take on a massive challenge, because if you're doing a county big year, if you're doing a state big year, if you're doing a global big year, there's going to be some level of sacrifice and perseverance that's going to take place. Do you have any advice that you want to share right now? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just definitely a lesson I learned, especially during my Michigan big year. If you're doing something like what I'm doing this year, you kind of have to just sort of abandon everything. But to do something a little bit more rational, like a state big year, a county big year, the advice I would give is to don't do what I did and don't let it consume every aspect of your life. Like on one hand, if a bird shows up, you have to go. You can't just say, oh, I'll get it later. But there were times during my Michigan big year where people would be like, hey, do you want to do this thing on Thursday? And I'd be like, I can't make plans. What if a bird shows up? Like my brother was visiting from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And he was like, hey, can you drive me from my grandma's house to one of our other brother's house? And I was like, maybe. I can't promise anything. And it's like, don't do that. Don't let it totally consume you. It's not worth that. I think that's my biggest regret of 2022. But for doing something like I've done this year, where you're just living on the road, you kind of have to, like you can't really, unless you're like working remotely or something like that. Pretty much the only thing you're doing is going where there are birds.
Well, Danny Bernard, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
As always, thanks everybody for tuning in to this week's episode of the Real Birding Podcast. If you have any other questions for Danny, drop them in the comments and we will ping them right over to him and see if we can get back to you guys. But yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Thanks so much, Danny. It was a pleasure seeing you, and maybe at some point here we'll see you at another chase in Michigan.
Absolutely. Or if you ever come to New Mexico, hit me up.
That state is a big gap in I've been there, but I've not birded it almost at all. So that actually could happen. That would be fun. I'll look you up.
I think it's an incredibly underrated state for birding. I think that obviously the big 4, you can pick your order, but they are California, Arizona, Texas, and Florida. I think it's hard to argue with any state being better than those 4. I would argue New Mexico is number 5. Michigan's really good. Some of the Pacific Northwest is really good, but I think New Mexico has a lot of the birds that Arizona has, just not nearly as many birders to see them.
There you go.
Very good point. There's a few. Yeah, I know a few of them, but you're right. I mean, it's just not a state you think of, but I know they've got mountain ranges that could have all kind of gems hidden in there, and probably very few people looking, and you're on the border, so that's always going to give you a potential surprise.
Well, we will be looking forward to see what kind of tales come out of New Mexico, and thanks again for coming on.
Have a good one.